Good morning everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. We are currently doing my normal monthly videos. So as a family of 8 living off-grid, we do 6 weekly groceries. I travel 4 hours away to do my groceries every 6 weeks, and I hit up Costco and Aldi and fruit and veg stores and butchers and Kmart and Bunnings and anything that I need to do. When I get back, what I tend to do is I have a lot of bulk food that needs to be processed. So for about the next 7 to 10 days of that particular period, I do daily videos showing you how I manage to make sure that all of the food is used, none of it is wasted, whether it goes into the freezer, into jars on the shelf, dehydrated, used up straight away, whatever works. So this is day 2 or 3, I have lost track, but this is one of the days not long after coming back from my last groceries, and there is videos with the grocery hauls as well if you're interested in those. Today I dealt with mince. So mince is one of the items that has to be used up within the first couple of days of getting back because it has a higher surface area and therefore the use by date on it is fairly quick. So today was about using up the mince that I had bought. I bought 2 4-kilo-ish packs of Costco mince, and that's what I was doing today. So come along and see what I managed to get done with that, and I will see you again tomorrow, next video, with the next bunch of items that I'm getting used up and showing you how to do them. Thanks guys. So as I said, we have to use up the mince fairly quickly. So it's something that has to be processed fairly straight away within the first sort of 24-48 hours of getting home. I think the best before date is normally only like 24 hours, but we are a little more lenient with our meat products than what's stated on the things, but that's personal preference. So this is the $9.99 a kilo minced beef from Costco, and it comes in approximately 4-kilo lots for around about the $40 mark. That's what I try and get that sort of sizing when I grab it, and we buy 2 for every 6 weeks approximately. I do sometimes buy an extra one to make an extra batch of freezer meals, but not always. It depends on budget and things like that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use a whole one of the 4-kilo lots to make Bolognese. So Bolognese is a very regular meal for us here. The kids really enjoy it. It's nice and simple. I have canned it, but I don't like the texture of beef done in pressure canned. So we actually freeze our Bolognese. We freeze it in 1.2 kilo lots in gallon Ziploc bags. I attempt to wash them out and reuse them if they're still in good enough condition as many times as possible, but this is the easiest way we've found to take up less space in the freezer and for our purposes. I fill my Bolognese with vegetables, so the first thing I do is I mince all my vegetables using my Thermomix. I like to use the Thermomix to get them nice and fine and blended through because it's better texture for the kids, but also it's just easier to cook that way. So I use a bunch of different vegetables depending on what I've got. I use carrot, celery, onions and garlic at a minimum, and I cut them all up before sticking them in the Thermomix. Now I got gifted some knives from Victorinox Australia, so I'm trying them out for the first time while I'm doing all these veggie mixes, and I've posted a reel on Instagram as well showing them slicing. They're really, really nice. So these were gifted to me to do a review of, and they have a plastic molded handle, and the knife itself is really nice and light, so I found it really good for slicing without too much pressure on my wrists. And they've got a really fine blade, so I got some really nice slivers when I was doing it as well. So I highly recommend these knives. I'll link the shop in the comments below, and thank you very much to Victorinox for gifting them to me. So I use the vegetables in the Thermomix. I sometimes do bacon. I actually forgot this particular time because we do have bacon because I've just been shopping, but I sometimes mince bacon up as well, and mushrooms if I've got fresh mushrooms. Then I have been known to put other vegetables in there as well, but the standards are these. So I mince them all up, stick them in the pot and cook them off like you do the vegetables normally. I did have some zucchini frozen as well. No fresh zucchini at the moment. Normally I would have fresh zucchini coming out of the garden by now, but we all know how well that's going at the moment. So I have some bags of frozen zucchini in the fridge that I use for zucchini bread. So I grabbed a bag of that out as well to add to the vegetables. And all I do is I put a bit of oil in the pan, all the minced vegetables, and I cook them off, sweat them off until the onion's a bit translucent and you've got a nice smell to it and things like that. Once it's all cooked off, I add my beef. So I just add the beef in chunks all the way through, and then I cook that off as well. So I use Tracy sent me this meat, I've forgotten what they're called now, the meat breaker-upper thingy, and it is awesome. Like, it is so much easier than trying to break all the meat up with a wooden spoon. It definitely breaks them up. It breaks it up more evenly. You still get some chunks of meat, which is nice because that's a good texture when you have your bolognese, but it helps to break up that meat for cooking purposes, and I really like it. I highly recommend these. I looked at them for ages and decided not to buy one because they cost a bit, and when Tracy heard that on one of my videos, she had one that she didn't use, so she sent it to me, and it's been wonderful. I would like a little bit of a longer handle for the bulk amount that I cook, but other than that, it is perfect. So I break all the beef up and cook that off for a while too. It doesn't have to be cooked, but it does need to be browned off, so that otherwise, if it's raw, when you're adding your liquids, it all clumps together. It doesn't break up properly, which is partly why you want to cook it off, so it creates that bit of a skin, like on most meats, and it ends up separating a bit and being more like mince than a rissole, I suppose, is a way to explain it. So I cook all the beef off as well with the vegetables. Once I've done that, I start adding the liquids. Now, it really does depend on the season, what's available and things like that as to how I make my bolognese, and I've made it a few times on the channel and it's probably different every time I make it because that's kind of what I do. So I add the liquids to the meat once the meat's cooked off. Today I used a jar of mushroom stock. So this was mushrooms that I had cooked off in some water or some chicken stock. I can't remember which one it was this particular time. And then I pressure canned them in jars so that I could use them later. So this is a jar of mushroom stock. I used a quart of chicken stock as well. Sometimes I use far more chicken stock than that. Quite often I will actually make a fresh batch of chicken stock on the stove that morning that I'm making the bolognese, so that I can just ladle out the chicken stock from the pot that I've just made, but I didn't get around to that this morning. I had too much going on. So I've just used a quart of chicken stock into the pot as well. I've used a couple of tins of crushed Australian tomatoes. Tin tomatoes are always nice in it. Crushed is good because of texture wise. Sometimes I use my own jarred tomatoes, but I don't have a great deal left at the moment because it's coming into tomato season again. So I always have some backup crushed tomatoes on the shelf to use. I use passata. Again, I don't make passata because I don't really grow enough tomatoes to make passata. It's just not efficient time and energy wise, so I buy passata and I use that. I also used a jar of tomato paste. Again, I don't make tomato paste, but I do dehydrate and grind down tomato skins if I've got them, which works quite well as tomato paste as well. I used some water in the passata bottles to make sure that I got all the passata out. Sometimes I would use stock if I had stock, like if I had that pot of stock beside it, but today I just used some water and give them a shake and then pour that into the pot as well. So I mix all that in through and I leave it to simmer for a bit to just mesh the flavors and things like that and let it simmer through. Once it's at a steady sort of a simmer, then I add my extra flavors. So these are all, again, personal preference of how you like to add flavors, and I am a little bit on the slapdash side of things here. I don't measure a whole lot, but I like to add some Worcestershire sauce, a generous amount of Worcestershire sauce. Balsamic vinegar is always really nice, and I sometimes have some neat flavors of balsamic that I use in there. This is just a standard balsamic vinegar. I always add smoked paprika. Anyone who's been around for a while knows that I add smoked paprika to pretty much everything I eat. Some salt. I used some beef bouillon powder because I didn't use as much stock and things like that, so I decided to add some beef bouillon powder in there as well. This is the Massel brand. It's one of the ones that we don't mind the ingredients list of. You can use your chicken stock paste from your Thermomix as well, but I like the depth of the beef bouillon for this particular dish. It's a beef dish, so I suppose that makes sense. I did add a pinch of some brown sugar. I like to add a tiny bit of brown sugar to help with the acidity of the tomatoes. And then I added more water. So again, sometimes I add stock, sometimes I add water. It really just depends on what I've got on hand. I added more water here, and I added about 4 litres, because what I do with my bolognese to make it work further for us is I add pearled barley. A lot of people add lentils to their bolognese. I don't like the texture of lentils, so lentils tend to break down and go almost gritty, is what I find, and I'm not keen on that texture in my bolognese. I understand that it's protein rather than carbs, it's good for you and all that sort of stuff, but even when I make my dal, I like my lentils to have more texture to them. But that's really hard for me to achieve with a bolognese, the way I cook it, so I much prefer pearled barley, because when it cooks it has a very similar texture to mince. It has that same sort of a bouncy bite to it, and it's got a kind of a nutty flavour to it, and I think it really complements bolognese. It doesn't detract from it, it complements it. And you could, my husband and I were Darryl and I were discussing the fact that you could potentially make a vegetarian bolognese by using pearl barley instead of mince. I think that would work quite well. The texture is close enough to mince for us that it doesn't detract from the dish, whereas we found lentils did. That was personal preference though. Whatever sort of a split pea, lentil, barley, whatever you want to use here, works really well to extend it. So I used quite a lot of this pearl barley because, as has been discussed, we're having some issues with getting food to last the full 6 weeks because I'm buying a little bit less with all the price increases. So I wanted to increase the capacity for this bolognese to extend. So I used quite a lot of pearl barley, added more liquid. I want to simmer it for quite a long time because I want that pearl barley to still have a little bit of tooth to it, but to be soft. You don't want any sort of hard grit in the middle. So as I'm cooking it, I make sure to stir it regularly to bring it up off the bottom of the pan. Being such a large stainless steel pan over a gas hob, it does tend to stick to the bottom if you're not careful. So I want to make sure to mix it regularly and top it up with any liquid as needed. Because I'm topping it up with liquid, I might adjust the flavourings and stuff like that too. I think I came back and added some more Worcestershire sauce. I may have added some garlic powder and onion powder and things like that, and just taste it and test it and see how it goes. And then simmer it until the texture is correct. So I just leave that to the side while I'm doing it. What I wanted to do with the other part of the mince that I had left, so I had bought 2 4-kilo minces, but I had used 2 kilos or 1.8 kilos for hamburgers for one night. So I had a little over 2 kilos left to do something with. So the other thing that we really like to use beef mince for is meatballs. I make a French onion style meatball, and we really like these with either with pasta sauce or with gravy and mash and veg, or sometimes crumbled up over nachos or crumbled up on a pizza. We use them in a lot of ways, so they're a real versatile thing, and I flash freeze them so that I can just pull out as many as I want or need for each dish as we're eating them. So what I do is I mince up a whole lot of onions in the Thermomix, 3 or 4 depending on the quantity of mince I've got, until they're nice and fine, because the kids don't really like big chunks of onion in their meatballs, and the meatballs don't cook very long in the oven, so if the chunks are too big, it's got a bit of crunch to it. It's not really my favourite thing either. I want the flavour of the onion but not the crunch. So I mince up a whole lot of onions in the Thermomix. I also do a homemade French onion soup mix, so it's basically the same stuff that you buy as a French onion soup mix, but without a lot of the additives. I did do a quick video of me making it, and I'll turn it into a short to show you all the ingredients that goes into it. I did 2 eggs, so about an egg per kilo of mince, and I did a splash of coconut cream. Now, the other thing I normally add is breadcrumbs, and my favourite type of breadcrumbs to use are stale bagels with the everything but the bagel seasoning on them, and I grind them up into breadcrumbs with my Thermomix, but I didn't have any bagels in the freezer, no stale bread anywhere or anything like that. So what I did was I ground up some breadcrumbs in the Thermomix, but what I used was some walnuts and some oats. So I crushed up sort of equal parts walnuts and oats to add that to the meatballs. And normally I would have soaked my breadcrumbs in that bit of coconut milk, but because I did it this way, I just put a splash of coconut milk into the mince and then added the breadcrumbs to it for that purpose. I also added a little bit of mustard powder and a bit of vinegar, because normally I add a bit of Dijon or whole grain mustard or something like that, but I have been slack and I haven't made any mustard up lately at all. So I just added some mustard powder and a bit of vinegar, give a similar sort of a umami sort of a boost to the flavors there, but not quite the same. But you know, it's a workaround. So I added that as well. You want to blend your ingredients together, but you don't want to knead it, because the more you work beef mince in this situation, the tougher your meatballs are going to be. So I really like to squeeze it through my fingers rather than kneading it. So I just squeeze it all to get it all combined as much as possible without overworking it in the bowl, so that it's all nice and together, and you're going to get bits of each of the flavors into each meatball. But yeah, don't overwork it too much, because if you overwork it too much, your meatballs end up sort of tough. I like to do my meatballs in 30-gram sizing. It's another one of these things. I like to weigh them. Not everyone is as pedantic as me, but it's the way I like to work it. So I use my scales, and what I do is I fill the scale with 30-gram balls, just adding it up in my head. You could tear it in between if you needed to, but adding it up, so you know, I put 30 grams, 60, 90, 120, that sort of thing, all as many as I can fit on my scales. And then I will roll them and place them on the tray. It's just the way I do it, and I know that some people find it odd, but it works for me, so that's what I do. So I have it all weighed out to 30-gram balls, and I fill the trays with it. I actually filled 2 full trays and a half tray with these meatballs. I didn't count how many it was, but that's how much I got out of this 2 kilos of meat. And I think when I bagged it up for the freezer, we ended up with... Some got eaten as they were cooked, because they always do, but it might have been 4 bags of 24 meatballs, maybe. That might be around about what I got. So they go into I cook them in the barbecue, because I cook everything in a hooded barbecue because I don't have an oven, and they take not very long, maybe 15-20 minutes at about the 180-200 mark. Just watch them, because they will burn if the heat is too much, and you don't want to overcook them, because they get cooked again when they're reheated for things. Like, you want them cooked because the kids will eat them cold, but you don't want to overcook them, because they will get recooked when they're reheated with gravy or with sauce or whatever else. One of the other things I had to get done today was mangoes, so, you know, a complete deviation. So I bought 2 $5 clearance boxes of mangoes. None of these mangoes were in particularly good condition. A couple were okay, but some of them had some severe bruising, some of them had some skin broken, things like that. Part of that would also be the transport issue from on the back of the ute. I think I stacked the boxes on top of each other, and I probably shouldn't have. But what I did was I just process them all. So all I do is I peel them all, and I put them on a baking tray to go into the freezer, and then I break it up and I put it in Ziploc bags to use for smoothies, or I freeze it in ice cube trays as well. It really just depends on what I've got available and what freezer space I've got too, but I want to do it in a way that it's portioned out, because if you freeze it in one big pulpy mess, it's really hard to cut unless you defrost it enough to cut it, and then it's messy, and you know, so you want to have it in a way that you can snap it, or in ice cube trays or something like that. Or if you have the space, freezing it in slices would be really good, but I don't have the space to spread things out into slices in my freezers, unfortunately. When we do that, I put all the good pips into a bowl. I cut any chunks off it and then put the pips in a bowl, and the kids really enjoy sucking them clean, which is great. And the skins I give to the chooks and the pigs. Last time I showed mango processing last month, there was a lot of discussion in the comments about how I could have used the skins, and I really wanted to try dehydrating for teas and things like that, but these mangoes were in such bad condition by the time I got them that I decided I wasn't going to. I was just going to feed it to the animals. I think next month mango should still be in season, so what I'm going to try and do is get a box of really nice, probably expensive ones, but so that I can clean up the skins to dehydrate for teas and try a few different things with them that I couldn't this time. I'm wondering if I could make a cordial out of the pips and the skins like I do with the pineapple, but I'm not sure because I wonder if the skins with the sap and stuff that's on the skins, if it's an issue. Anyway, I'm going to have a few plays with it, but I think I need a box of nice, clean, good quality mangoes to give that a go. It was just too much effort to cut away good skin and stuff from these ones when they just needed processing, so that's all I did. I did get asked about slicing mangoes the best way for eating, so I did do a quick snippet here of how we slice them when we're eating them straight. So you need to slice them from the top down on the long sides, and then you do a grid pattern on the cheek of the mango, and then you flip it out the wrong way, and then all the little squares are there for you to be able to either eat with your mouth straight off the skin or to peel off and eat. Mangoes, because of the sap and the outside of the skin, you don't want to touch the outside of the skin with your mouth because you end up with rashes. So that by popping it out like this, it means that you can drag your teeth along the inside of the skin, but you don't have to worry about touching the outside. So this is the way that we tend to cut them if we're eating them straight off the skin and things like that. Though because I normally buy in bulk, the kids don't get it like this very often because there's plenty of mango on the pips that they can eat, and I can use all the flesh for smoothies. So that's the way it goes. This is what the meatballs look like when they're cooked. So I probably overcooked these just a touch, but they're not dry. They're just a little overcooked, but they will work perfectly for us. And then this is what the bolognese looked like when it was done. So our bolognese is always really, really thick. And the reason for that is because I do a 1.2 kilo lot of this for them to eat for dinner, but I add a jar of canned pasta sauce as well. So I make pasta sauce with a whole lot of vegetables in it as well that I can, and I put on the shelf, and then so we thin out the bolognese with that as well. Again, it extends it even further, especially now that they're eating 2 500-gram packets of pasta per meal. So that is what I got done with all the mince today. I hope that has been enjoyable to watch and potentially given you some information on what you can do with your excess mince as well, and how we use it and things like that. And thank you for watching again, and I will see you again next time. Bye guys.